I pressed too.
Nice. So last week we had due to traveling and stuff, there was a few weeks where we didn't meet. So last time, one of the things we did was right at the end is we went over the video of our last session, right? In that last one, and it was on virtue. And that was the one where we talked about this kind of sense of in the aspirational sense of virtue, right? The metaphor that Sandra came up with, and then Daniel clothed it, basically, was this sense that virtues being something like the garment, and that there's a nakedness that we have to the good, right? But that nakedness and that sheer shining of the good and that claim of the good on us, right, it's too much, right, to bear. To begin to bear it, each virtue is something like a clothing or a garment, right? Which I just listened to it again this morning, that last part, which was really linked to this sense of, and I really liked this as a grounding point in understanding it, is like, how does someone go from not understanding or being able to hear music, right, to somebody who deeply understands and appreciates music, right? There's virtue in there, right? And that there's this, in order to understand music, we could say that there's just, you have to get the distinctions, right? So if the patterns, right, aren't distinct for you, you can't experience them. So how do you go from not being able to experience them and have them, right, to be able to experience them and have them? Something about that virtue operates in that manner, that kind of, Vervaeke says, talks about the proleptic, is that the right word? Proleptic rationality?
Proleptic rationality.
Yeah, proleptic rationality. Mm-hmm. In that sense that you become someone, right? In this kind of sense of garments, right? Putting on garments, which is in nakedness, right? And clothed, right? This was just so rich in that sense. And then Daniel, when you got back from, one of the things I think you mentioned actually when we were talking is that when you got back from seeing Ivo and spending the day with Ivo de Janeiro, and he talked about if you can go over those words again, the difference between where he was coming from with in terms of the principle, right? Not aspiration, but memory.
Yes, so he contrasted anagoge, which is aspiration, and anamnesis. Both of these things are found in Plato. And he said to us that for him, it's just remembering the principle. This has to do with kind of like our earliest memories.
Yeah.
Something we kind of know as children, we have that native belongingness, as he would perhaps say in Principles of Philosophy, that nearness to the principle. It's a kind of, we are, as children, we are constantly alert to that. And that's why, for example, Heraclitus or Nietzsche evoked the image of a child for the highest mode of being. Nietzsche, for example, has this model. So like in the Zarathustra, he lays this out, and the last stage is so say we become like children again. We learn to play again, and that's the highest mode of being. That's perhaps the highest possible participation with the principle, with being itself. That's possible. So it's just memory. Then we would have to perhaps ask, okay, when I first, I listen. Let's stay with the music example. I listened to a wonderful piece of music, and I get a sense for the principle which I've forgotten. And with Heidegger, we would say we have all forgotten the oblivion of being, the famous one. Then how can we just continually remember that? And then I would say still that something like virtues are necessary, because they afford us this process of memorizing.
Yeah. We remember and we memorize, right?
It's funny, in German, the word remember also means something like eninnering, if I would translate it very literally, eninnering. So eninnering, like it means really to in this in kind of, there's an internalization. There's something that goes on within you, that you are innering that, whatever it is. So the German really means erinnern means, there's really innering is, I don't know if this is an English verb or so, but it has this to interiorize something also. Yeah, that's on that.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing remembering as like we become fractionated, we become fractured by experience in life, and remembering as members of ourselves, or pieces of ourselves that are now reintegrating, maybe in a more sophisticated organization as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that I wanted to kind of, in doing this today, I wanted to explore more of, like, because if we start to think aspiration, think virtue not as aspiration, but as memory, right? And I know that being a Heideggerian, Ivo's, I think Ivo would probably say, so Heidegger would probably say, if you go with aspiration, you fall in that metaphysical tendency to have everything come to this point, right?
Exactly. It's exactly this. You aspire towards this point, and then you go back, and then you have the metaphysical scheme.
Yeah. And that there's another way that can be revealed or talked about, right? So memory is just it's interesting to think. It's also very Platonic. I mean, Plato has all that stuff about knowledge being recollection and remembering, and even the good. I mean, that's, in some sense, that's so much of what the grappling, the dialogues are so much about, is this quagmire with good that you can't not presuppose it. So in some sense, you can't ever get it out in front of you in some clear way. You can't. It's like in some sense, you can't shake the memory of it or something, right? like any move that you make already presupposes, right, the good or something like that. So it's got this deep claim on us. And so in some sense, like, you know, the platonically, it's like the process of coming to know the forms, the eidos, right, is a recollection, right? And I think that's really does it. Insights for me feel like that, right? Like it's the same feeling of like when I have an insight, it's the same experience. It's the same thing when I've lost something is like the moment I found it. Like if I, oh yeah, I fucking put my keys over here.
Yeah.
Right there, that opening, phenomenologically, experientially, for me feels exactly the same thing as memory. So one of the things I'd like to do today is just kind of, in some sense, explore virtue, make propositions about virtue, but really looking at thinking it from memory in this way.
So do you have a proposal, Guy?
I think I do. Let's find out.
Let's see.
All right. So I was in the last one. Yeah, Daniel was the last one. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So I'll propose. You want to reduce, Daniel?
Sure.
And then you want to scribe, Sandra? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll set the timer. And actually, I'd like to let's just take another couple of minutes just to sit in silence. Right. Jen, you had a question for me, right?
No, Sandra just asked what you think is virtue and
proposal. Daniel, just ask him to tell me what virtue is or something.
Hey, Guy, what is virtue?
I propose that virtue is a hermeneutical, circular recollection of native endowment of the good.
Virtue is a hermeneutical, circular recollection of the native endowment of the good. Sounds good for you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in what way is it hermeneutical and circular?
Yeah. In this way that way that the good is always presupposed. Like you can't not presuppose it, right? The moment I take any kind of action or have a thought or something, I am enacting, demonstrating, inhabiting, being, and intelligibility, right? If we say that the good is like, I heard John call it the good is like the promissory note of of that being is intelligible. And so it's hermeneutic in the sense that the virtue, I take a step, that step is actually, that step in virtue is itself, in some sense, the beginning of the virtue. But as I keep stepping forward, right, the here's the hermeneutic circular part of it. The circle part of it is that as it comes back around, right, it actually, in these ways, updates and confirms my understanding of the virtue, right? And in the act of that, there's the act of like it coming around, in some sense, getting a deeper cut, getting confirmation, getting something about the more is revealed about the virtue, right? That then becomes, in some sense, historical, right? And that historicity, right, is where I'm kind of like walking from, but I'm also walking towards it. And that's why it's a recollection, right? In some sense. That's how I want to play with it here, I think.
Okay. So virtue has to do something, or is even that movement that you just tried to describe.
Yeah.
It's coming from historicity towards me, but it is a recollection of something that comes towards me.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I understand that part a little bit better. In what sense are we natively endowed to this? Perhaps how can we recollect, how can we realize this native endowment?
Yeah. Well, I think it's, in some sense, you can't propositionally. But if we say that hermeneutical circling around, right, is this movement, right? It's embodied, right? I think in some sense it's not definitely not just intellectual understanding, the good, or having propositions about it. It's in some sense because you, in some sense, become the good, right? You become it starts to animate your personhood, right? So, and there's something about, this is why it's connected to wisdom, right? Because it's like you can't, it's a comprehension of the good that you can't grasp it and hold on to it and have it, right? It's the process of walking in these spirals, right? It's this kind of letting go, right? It coming back, right? And that's, I think, where it has to do with this knowledge, and it's particularly wisdom, right? Because it's always incomplete and there's nothing final about it. Yet I can't not live it. I cannot presuppose it in the very step I'm taking, right?
So there's this process going on. And I think you said that well. We're always in that process.
Yeah, even now.
And we are so, right, we're natively endowed to that process, so we are open to it. We can participate in it.
Yeah.
We can realize that.
Yeah.
When I get aware of this, how does it feel?
How does it feel?
Yeah.
What's the it?
What is the embodied sense when you?
It's it feels well, it feels a lot of different ways, but in fact, it feels all the ways that you can feel. But I want to say that the experience or feeling has to do with this paradoxical is how it feels, right? So I don't think it's an accident that we want to say, right, and in the clothes, because as you're walking, in some sense, you're like, you're garmenting, right? But you're also, right, losing garments, right? You realize the unfittedness for this particular way of understanding or way of orienting, right? It's like the thing that was virtuous last week is that very same thing is opposite of virtue, like this week, right? And that somehow, so it's like you lose clothes and you bring on clothes. It's paradoxical. And I think there's something important going on in this ambiguity in the word reveal, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's something really important in that ambiguity, right? In that sense that to, reveal, it could mean to veil again, right? But it also reveals, it also unveils.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of, both those movements are going on, right? Right? As the virtue unfolds or the virtues come together, right? And unfold and inform and withdrawal, that as it's unconcealing and it's becoming clear to me, right? There's also a way where it's, on one level, it's revealing, but in these ways that I probably don't understand yet, right? It's also concealing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that revealing, concealing, that completeness and incompletion, that paradoxical, that absolute ambiguity, has, I think in some level, is deeply, it's like, well, one, it's deeply revealing of being and the good, right, in itself. Yeah. Oh, did I set the timer? Oh, yeah.
I think it feels like we
yeah,
10 minutes.
Probably 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll directly go into appreciation, if that's okay. So initial, or maybe I'll ask this before. Your initial proposal was virtue as a hermeneutical circular recollection of the native endowment of the good.
Yeah.
How does that sound? No.
Sounds good to me. That still holds true.
I think it also sounds good, and I think even in that everything you brought up, that strengthens your proposal. So I will appreciate this. I mean, you were really, this was like a crash course in some Heideggerian philosophy, what you just did. Kind of about he talks about the strife of revealing and concealing. That was already, is there even in the word aletheia, in truth, what was truth for the Greeks. And it was even great to kind of see your body, or your hands at least, really moving in that tension.
Yeah.
It's very primordial tension that the human being is in. Okay. There's a sense of mystery, and it has to do with forgetting, I think. So we are always in this hermeneutical process, but and for Heidegger, in some sense, today we have completely forgotten about this dimension, the invisible, inaudible dimension. Complete forgetfulness about it. So you added this, this element of losing clothes and getting clothed when we enter into this. So we get aware of this process, this is going on, this hermeneutical process, and there's this likelihood of unlikelihood that we could completely forget about the process. So just we don't see it, we don't recognize it, we don't remember it. That is unvirtuous, let's say. That is unvirtuous. Virtue is then kind of attaining fitness within that path that goes on there, something like that. That's virtuous. I attain a kind of fitness, firmness, so I can hold myself in that movement. And perhaps that's my proposal even.
That sounds like right into their proposal. All right. I'll scribe.
Okay. And so Daniel, what is virtue?
Virtue? Do you have something to write, Guy?
Let me grab it real quick.
I'll wait. Yeah, I'll wait a minute.
All right. Thank you.
Great. So I said, virtue is the peculiar fitness and perhaps even I will not say that. It's the peculiar fitness that allows us to hold ourselves in the hermeneutical circular movement of recollection. I have to say, qua forgetting. So it's it can be both. We can be completely unaware of what's going on. We can be in complete denial. That's unfortunately also what that's that would be this really important. Because even if we realize that we are in denial, then that's like the first step towards recollecting, realization. Oh, I've forgotten all of this. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like the initial awakening, I guess.
So virtue is the peculiar fitness. Is that right?
Yeah.
Fitness by which or through which we can move in our human hermeneutical circular recollection qua forgetting of the good, or forgetting qua recollection of the good. Is that essentially what it is?
Yes. So I tried with that qua. I just tried to combine that contradictory, ambiguous, paradoxical dimension Guy worked out so well.
And it's qua because forgetting means that there's a knowing at some level. If it's forgetting rather than complete ignorance of. It's forgetting, meaning at some level I knew, but I just forgot.
Yes, forgetting as forgetting, perhaps. If I realize the forgetting as the forgetting, I can really acknowledge, oh, I've really forgotten that. I'm really in denial. Mm-hmm. That's like the first step towards virtuosity or healing.
Right. Now, Daniel, I'm curious about what is peculiar about the fitness.
It's peculiar because it allows us it's of course not fitness as we usually understand it, but it's a kind of just it's a kind just a way of perhaps in my how I imagine it is putting on garments is perhaps a very passive act. I'm just putting on the garments. While when I'm having the fitness, it's more alert, it's more active. It comes more from really the body and the mind in their aligned participation with the good. That fitness, even then I know, okay, now I have to let that garment perhaps fall away, and now I have to put on a new one. So it even tells me, it gives me the optimal grip, so I know exactly right in the moment what virtue is necessary. What's the right virtue? What's the right comportment for the moment? It gives me a kind of flexibility, so I can really hold myself in that constant tension.
So when you describe the difference between putting on the garment and developing the fitness, you went from sort of a passive, like, receiving or putting on some clothing, but now you're energized, you're active, you're involved, you're participating in
I guess
you are it.
I guess I would like to highlight a kind of skillfulness, even in the putting on the garments and perhaps letting the garments go. The image I had was kimono wearing, because kimono wearing is extremely difficult to learn. It takes
Call it
kimono, like these Japanese, these traditional clothes that you wear for like marriage ceremonies or like tea ceremony.
Yeah.
It takes they have a kind of own that they have to practice this.
Yeah.
It's not like a t-shirt that you put on like in 1 second, but it's like kimono wearing it takes really skill. It takes like, well, I have an image in my mind, when a child learns how to bind the shoelaces together.
Yeah,
that's really difficult, and that's for a child, and that really takes some skillfulness, I would say, that is present in the, let's say, in the art of wearing a kimono as well. It's really difficult. You have a lot of, you have a lot of what's that? I don't know the word. But you have like garters and belts, and you have a lot of different elements that fit together, and it takes hours. It can take hours to take on just a kimono to have it ready. So
and
that's
it's an art. It's an art.
It's an art. Yeah. I think traditionally we perhaps had a better sense for this, when even when everything was an art form, clothing was an art form.
Tea ceremony was an art form, yeah. Even tea, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and everything that was ritualized, when we gathered together to have a meal, there were all sorts of rituals enacted, which perhaps also point us toward that peculiar fitness that I have in mind. Everything's very easy today, easygoing, and perhaps we forget about that.
Of course, when you're talking about taking it off, you're talking about unveiling.
Yeah. So, virtue is really holding on and having the fitness to hold on in that strife, that ambiguity that you described, Guy. That I think is virtue.
So virtue is the attainment, is attaining fitness with the and fitness, and I would and maybe commitment to the path.
Yeah. I just wanted to perhaps stress the dynamic quality of even let's say, even if I have my wardrobe of all the garments of the virtue, I need a kind of, again, a peculiar fitness, so I know, that day I have to wear this, and perhaps, in that situation I have to wear this one. So I know exactly how to put them on, and now I don't need this, I put it back, and so I take a new one. And this is a really dynamic kind of fitness. So we can maneuver through that hermeneutical process that is always creating an ambiguity.
So I'm seeing it as a very individual participation in the universal aspects, because there is, as you're choosing and putting on and taking off, that there's a highly individualized path or route that you are following with commitment. It's ritualized, but it's not sort of, you're not turning off you're not going through the motions. You're actually participating as your momentary experience unfolds. So that there's the peculiar part is peculiar to each individual who's practicing this. Right?
Yes.
Am I getting that right? That's the peculiar part. It's not odd. It's peculiar to you. It's individual to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a circular movement of taking off, putting on, concealing, revealing, and moving with this circular hermeneutical. So it's a individual participation through the peculiar aspects of your development of virtue.
Yes, and also kind of the peculiar state of my development, where I am in all of that.
Yeah.
How much I am able to bear.
Yeah.
But also, in a sense, the uniqueness of each moment. Because sometimes you're when you're on mushrooms, you have like it's like you have a massive disclosure. And perhaps when you're addicted, it just that dimension shrinks. So it's and sometimes you revealed a lot, sometimes you revealed nothing. So it's being itself, how it comes towards us, is also always different. So in that sense, there's also a uniqueness to each moment in time.
So there's no rule book. There's no rule book.
There's no guidebook.
Yeah. And what's virtuous one day is not the next, according to the conditions. So yeah. And so it's this play, it's this sort of play, the peculiar play that you are engaging in this playing with the reality of the good.
Yeah. Perhaps I think I can share this. Ivo told us that the only teacher we have, so there's no guidebook, but the only teacher we have is the inception itself. So that movement of coming toward us, that is the only teacher we have. The inception tells you when you learn to listen to it, it tells you what you have to do. It's kind of like that when it's with Heraclitus, right? Don't listen to me. Listen to the logos. And if you listen to the logos the inception tells you exactly what you need to follow. And
so as you're saying that too, Daniel, the word fitness is a sort of flexibility, it's freedom of movement, it's complete freedom to respond appropriately to whatever is coming at you. Right? Yeah. And that's why fitness is better than sort of the static image of a garment that you put on that you can also hide behind, by the way.
But I don't know why I like fitness, but even when I have the image of even when you do fitness, you also know how to clothe. When you run a marathon in the winter, you have to take on garments that fit to this situation. When you run and when you go hiking in the summer, you have to take on different garments, so you know exactly what to take with you.
And that's the dynamic, as you said, the dynamic the process of that ongoing interaction with the inception. That yeah.
So you want to go to appreciation?
So yeah, what I appreciated was the kind of movement into dynamic quality of this of what Daniel was pointing to. I was thinking kind of before about virtue is something that we practice or that we develop, but Daniel's moved it now into something that is more of a well, I use the word play, but not in terms of playing around, but actual encountering of reality with flexibility, openness, all those things that our developing our fitness allows us to engage in more fully. So when we were talking earlier about needing the cloaks of virtue in order to encounter reality because we are too naked, it would disassemble us. Now we're talking more about a participation in developing fitness within ourselves. We don't need external garments. We ourselves are enough if we are developing that flexibility and fitness, that dynamic quality. We have what we need. We just need to optimize our fitness. That's what I appreciate. It sort of gives me a sense of we don't need anything. We already have it. We just need to develop our
fitness and memory is interesting.
Yeah.
So it's already there, and fitness helps us to actualize the memory that is already present. Thank you, Sandra. It was a good turn.
And so
Sandra.
Yeah.
What is it time for you to?
What is virtue? Can I just do an appreciation? Well, I did appreciation, but can I do the mystery?
Yeah.
So where it's pointing me now. It's moved me now into this interchange between what I call me and what I call reality, and that inception, as the inception is presenting or encountering me, like so. And we had touched on this before in the last week about is virtue something that, I'm putting it in my words, is virtue something that I develop, or is virtue something that inhabits me and works itself into existence through me? That is, so is there actually a boundary between me and virtue? And so the mystery of that is who or what is acting, who or what is enacting and acting. So I would propose something like,
what is virtue?
Yeah, what is virtue? Virtue is simply an enactment of the good out of its expansive fullness, something like that. Virtue is the good enacting its fullness in the world, in reality.
Is the good enacting its fullness
through in reality. Yeah.
through reality. So there's two that you gave. I'll read both of them. First one was virtue is an enactment of the good out of its expansive fullness. The second one was virtue is the good enacting its fullness through reality.
Yeah.
Virtue is the good enacting its fullness through reality.
Yeah, I prefer that one. It gives a more dynamic, creative thrust to the proposal.
Yeah. And is it for you answering the question that you had right at the end there with in relationship to Daniel's proposal about what was that question that you had asked?
Was something like who is
Yeah.
I have written it down. So you asked Sandra, who or what is enacting?
Yeah.
Is it me or is it the virtue itself?
And before that, you
and
yeah.
I would propose that it's the good itself through it's the creative action of the good itself.
Yeah.
That's what I would propose.
Right. Virtue is.
I don't consider myself to be the center of the universe.
Yeah. Yeah. Because clearly I am, right?
Oh, I see. I sensed that, Guy. I've sensed that all along.
Virtue is the good, enacting its fullness through reality. Right. Okay.
I would say in and through reality too. In and through, because there is a containment and there is also a full-on creative participation in that creates reality.
Yeah.
It's both a container and the creation of reality.
Yeah. So there's a container and creation of. Yeah. And the container and creation of is. So on one level, you're saying there's a dynamic of like the virtue can be the container and the process thus contained. Yeah. Okay. Okay, got it. When virtue, if we kind of take this from perhaps being maybe good to use our go back to our person who doesn't know anything about music. And
doesn't know anything about what?
Music, right?
Oh, music, yeah, right.
That metaphor, right? We look at this and we say, so, and then within, I don't know, 2-3 years, they are now, they wrote a book on appreciating music, let's say. And that first concert, they were bored and couldn't understand why anyone would even like pay attention to it. And now they're, through virtue, in some mysterious way that you're going to reveal to us, right? They're like the top author, best-selling author of how to listen to music.
So how would they move from there?
Yeah, and what you're saying is that if virtue does that, virtue does it because it's the good, enacting itself, or enacting its fullness in and through reality. Yeah.
And in that picture that you're painting, the way it enacts itself is in the conditions under which that person is brought into the fullness of their musical capability. The conditions are present. That's the good enacting itself. It provides the conditions so that the person's native musicality finds opportunities for full development.
Okay, got you. And with the conditions, I guess what's mysterious to me about this is this kind of, how does the person go from not understanding music, right? There's that part, but also not being attracted to music, to wanting to want to be attracted to music, right? Are the conditions, in what way is virtue the container in that moment, right?
Well, all I can think of, Guy, is that I think there is a kind of musician who is not a native, and there's a kind of musician who is almost forced into being a musical performer by the conditions under which that I'm talking sort of personally here. The conditions under which that happens are that something other than native appreciation of music is cathected into some kind of striving for perfection. So rather than the musicality being made virtuous, it's something other than that. It's a need for recognition, a need for a need for showing oneself to be perfect or something like that. So that's a false kind of, that I think virtuosity, musical virtuosity can be achieved, but it's not the pure virtue of musicality that is developed. I don't know if that's answering your question, but I think there can be a sort of false virtue that people can put in.
Yeah. So there could be, so what you're saying is the containment or the condition, right, for the process of virtue can actually, without us necessarily on the surface, can look like it's virtue, but it's a false virtue. Right? Or it's at least it's a different virtue. It's
a virtue of a different kind other than the pure musicality.
Totally. So in that sense, there you're saying there's a way. Let's say, for example, little Sandra shows up, and she's got a sense that, oh, that's time. Well, I was just gonna say, so she's got a sense that there's that perfection is where it's at, and she's got to be perfect, right?
And the only way that she can prove her perfection is through musical virtuosity.
Yeah, so that ends up being kind of a means to that end of achieving a certain kind of perfection, right? in that way, right?
But it's not a pure kind of native flowering of her innate musicality
Yeah.
in its real fullness and joy.
Yeah.
And joy. Yeah.
Well, it feels like that just opened up a whole false virtue, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just opened up a whole.
That's interesting. That's interesting, isn't it? Because I would suspect that's really not just one case. I think there are
Oh yeah.
many cases where that can happen, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. It happens underneath your nose.
Well, as John says, all that, whatever helps us to adapt can also lead us into self-delusion.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So virtue is, there's more to it.
Yeah. Maybe this is what we pick up on next time.
Yeah.
What is false virtue or something?
Yeah, something like that.
So I'm going to go into appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I'll just read off this again. So virtue is the good you're proposing.
Mm-hmm.
Virtue is the good, enacting its fullness in and through reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as you're saying that, even when we say there is false virtue, that's still an enactment of the good.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally. And that's the way the good is always presupposed in everything. That's the way, that's why we can't make the good an object, right? In some sense, because it's always, even in our deception.
Yeah.
Right? It's
even then.
It's because on some level I have an attraction towards something that ultimately is virtuous, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So this question of false virtue.
And there is self-correction in the system.
Yeah.
There is an inherent self-correction in the system as well, so that even if we went on the wrong road, then we correct it.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm. Huh. It's amazing.
What I'm appreciating, right? Is actually it's like one of the things that just opened up is this way that on one level we're already always operating in some kind of virtue, right? I guess that's the hermeneutic sense of I'm already underway with an orientation, a towardness, right? A future. And that is a memory, right? It's historical, right? Yet that is going to come back towards me. But there's ways where I think the thing I'm appreciating is that, it's also indirect, right? In this way that I can actually think I'm wanting to learn music, but what I'm actually doing, right, is being perfect so that I can be loved, or this, that, or the other thing, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's I'm just appreciating that dimension of it that just opened up, and it's also the one that's mysterious to me. How do we think that?
Yeah, and how did we get there too? I'm not sure. I'll have to watch the tape again. I don't know how that came up.
It's the question of like, how is it that you go? How does little song go from zero about music to wanting to want to know music?
Right? Yeah. So basically, there was a recollection.
Mm-hmm.
of the steps. Yeah,
Have you guys
that's
ever seen,
interesting. That's really interesting.
have you guys ever seen the arrow and the FedEx sign?
No,
1 second. 1 second. How many times do you think you've seen the FedEx sign?
I don't know. I haven't really looked at it.
I bet probably hundreds of thousands of times.
Yeah. Let's see the error. This is great.
Images. Second. Got this. All right. Share screen. See there? Okay, just so now I'll give you like a hint. Negative space.
Oh, the arrow.
You just saw it?
Yeah.
Where is
it? Between the E and the X. Right?
Yes, there it is. Had you ever seen that before?
No, I have to say I also don't see a FedEx. Like FedEx isn't that common a brand in Austria. Like I don't see FedEx that much.
Right.
I know of FedEx because of some of the American movies, but that's all.
Oh, I thought you said the error on
the arrow. The arrow.
The arrow. Oh
Yes.
yeah. Now, now I see the arrow. I thought I was looking for the error.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. Got you. See,
Yeah,
this is what's interesting about this sense of like, you know, it's for most people, they don't see it. This is fun to do in courses, to get the sense about distinction, right? And how it brings something in the undistinguished background, a distinction when it's distinguished, brings it into the foreground, right?
Yeah.
And you can only really have thoughts and feelings and relationships with things that are distinct to you, to relate with, right? So this kind of point from going from not seeing it to seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
What's really interesting is all I could do is point to it. If you don't see it, I can point to it, but I can't actually, there's nothing I can do to make you see it. There is this leap that goes on, right? That happens inside of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think what we're saying in some sense, especially when it comes to something like the music, right? Because it's so clearly about like, being able to hear something that you weren't hearing before, right? But how do you go from not hearing it and not hearing that you don't hear it to then hearing that you don't hear it to then hearing it, right? Something about that line, virtue has something to do with that. And what's interesting is I can't do it. All I can do is point to it, but there's some freedom that you have. And by the way, everything in your life is the arrow. It's like anything that you relate with is a figure on the background.
On the ground, yeah.
Right? Totally. A good example of this was there was a movie about it was about a Pepsi-Cola bottle, I think, or Coke bottle, where somebody it's a satire, but it's somebody in the plane threw out a Coke bottle in Africa in the lands, and the whole movie is about what you know, it lands in this kind of African tribe, and they have no context for it. So it goes from being a god to a weapon to all these different things, right? So the movie's all about the
they're a pygmy tribe, aren't they?
something like that. It wasn't like a documentary. It was a comedy. But that really highlights that sense that, you know, in some way there's this, the world, right, is not the stuff. It occurs, right?
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Until it occurs, right? I can't have a relationship with it, and I can't relate to that non-relationship, right? So in some way, there's something operating, and I think it has to do with virtue.
I see. Oh, I see where you're driving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So primordial.
Yeah.
And so in the very guts of our basic functioning, right? World. And so, but it's super near to us. So it's really difficult to see.
You're kind of asking the $1 million question, kind of what is awakening? I see that question on the horizon. What is awakening or what is enlightenment?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is this, right? How do we come from not realizing anything to realizing?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is insight? That kind of thing.
Yeah. I have a feeling it starts with, you know, when someone looks up at something, there's you know, if somebody's at the street corner, you just do an experiment. If you on the street corner and just stand there, just look up.
Yeah.
Right. And pretty soon everyone's going to be looking up because they can't not look up. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's something in that relationship, right? That if the people in your life are putting their attention on something, right? There's something, basically it's saying that at least for that person, there's something valuable enough. Pay attention to that and not the infinite amount of everything else, right? You paying attention to that. And if I look over there, and especially if I'm a kid, and then all the big people who are the gods, right, are looking over there, and I can't see what they're seeing, right? I sense something's, they're valuing something, but it's not an it's an object to them, but it's not one to me, right? So there's something, but then there's that kind of sense of whatever that relationship is that has me know that that's a sign of importance, right? In some sense. Virtue, I think, maybe is involved in all that.
Something like that, yeah.
It's 12:17. I gotta go.
Yeah, here we are.
Really good. Really good to do this with you guys again. So good.
So we'll see you next week.
Yes.
Yep. Great. Bye.
Bye.